Welcome to my presentation on autistic girls and women. I am going to explore some of the unique presentations, some information about special interests, and also the importance of autistic well-being. I'm going to start with a disclaimer. I am not a neurodivergent individual, and as such, I don't have any lived experience. I'm providing this information today based off of my own knowledge, which I have drawn from some resources, which I have included at the back. It is my understanding that these resources are safe and supportive for neurodivergent folks. But please, if you have any concerns about the information provided or the language used in the presentation today, please let me know. I am still developing in my neuroaffirming practice. Language is where I'm going to start today. So I wanted to sort of explore some of the definitions that are often used in the space of autism, ADHD. Obviously, neurodiversity is a word that is used quite commonly and I think often quite incorrectly. I myself am I have done this before, but neurodiversity just refers to the normal spectrum of brain differences. So everything is normal, everything is on the neurodiversity spectrum, and everyone's brains fall somewhere on neurodiversity. Now, neurotypical is the people that have the most common brain type. Neurodivergent is the people who are considered not neurotypical. Now, this can include things like autism, ADHD, some specific learning disabilities like dyslexia, dyscalculia. It can also include mental health in general. Any brain differences from what is considered the most common would fall under this category. Now, it is previously believed, research previously indicated that autism overwhelmingly impacted males more than females, with it impacting 4 males to 1 female. Now, with our current understanding of autism and our more recent research on autism, it's indicating it's somewhere closer to 2 males to 1 female. Now, it's likely that this is probably also not quite accurate. We're still figuring out autism and what it looks like in lots of different presentations, so this might be subject to change. But previously, research on autism was very focused on the more typically male presentation of autism than what we consider to be the female presentation, so the high masking, high camouflaging presentations. That is what I'm going to talk about now, is what does a female autism presentation look like, because we have not been very good at noticing them. Okay, so female presentations. Often female presentations of autism are diagnosed later than typically male autism presentations. We might find that females are more high masking or better at camouflaging. They present with better social skills. They also present with better language and imitation skills, and they have a better ability to blend socially. They also might be less noticeably different or disruptive than male autism. Now, this is a very obviously under the radar presentation. Autistic women and girls, because of this, are often misdiagnosed, misunderstood, or missed completely. Often, in my practice, a lot of women who have presented with no autism diagnosis, and then we later suspect that maybe there is some autistic traits or ADHD traits, we often find that they're presenting with diagnoses such as borderline personality disorder or OCD, or some severe social anxiety. Often they can have a different array of diagnoses, but not quite exactly what is going on. They just don't fully explain everything that's going on for them. Female autism misconceptions. Now, this is the way that society sort of sees female autism, unfortunately. Often we get, she's too social, she's just shy, she's just anxious, she doesn't have any obscure interests, she's just naughty, she's just lazy. she can't be autistic because she has friends, or she isn't interested in trains, or she just needs to try harder. Lots of females with autism have heard many, if not all, of these statements at some point in their life, and it can be very harmful because it sort of is quite dismissive of what they might be struggling with or what they might be going through. And it doesn't mean that they don't have autism. Just because a child is social doesn't mean that they don't have autism, or maybe they are anxious and shy and have autism. But hopefully, as a occupation, as psychologists, we are getting better at noticing this. Common challenges to look for. So this is to help you sort of understand what female autism presentations might actually look like in a young person or in an adult as well. There might be extreme focuses on a single topic or a range of topics, but the intensity is quite large. They might be able to contain their anxiety in public, but then they really struggle and they have meltdowns at home. They might be quite overly dependent on one single friend, and that can be a very intense, very tumultuous friendship perhaps. Unsure how to make those connections despite being interested in making connections. They might want to make friends, but they really struggle to make friends, or maybe they can't maintain friendships. They can be quite controlling in play. For younger people, that's what this might look like. Very literal interpretation of language. Often we see a lot of fluidity in gender and sexual identity as well in autism. Very empathetic and sensitive. Very good attention to detail, good imagination. Often I think in autism, we sort of view autistic individuals as not being very good at imagination or imaginative play. That is not accurate. Autistic individuals can have a very good imagination. They might present with some perfectionism or disorganization with basic routines and tasks. Might be seen as a bit of a tomboy during school, or might be described as shy. Hyperfocuses or special interests. It is important to note that this can be absolutely anything. It is not about how obscure it is, and it's not about the thing, it's about how intense the focus is. It can be absolutely anything. It can be people, it can be things, topics, shows, games, art, creativity, religion. It can literally be any single subject on the face of the earth. It's about how intense the subject is and what that individual experiences. So we might see that these change as well throughout time. Like maybe they will be quite hyper-focused on one thing for a certain period of time, and then it changes to something else, or there's a period without a hyper-focus or a special interest. But often we do see that those resurface. There's often a couple of special interests that autistic people have across their lifespan that are pretty ongoing for them. It's different with ADHD. Hyper-focuses often change frequently and regularly for those with ADHD, and they can be just as intense but maybe burn out quite much faster, or they get put to the side and they don't get returned to. Often ADHD people are sort of hobby collectors, so they might do knitting and crocheting and then reading, and then maybe they play golf, and maybe they do this, and then maybe they do that. They like to try lots of different things. They like that newness of things. When to screen for autism. So if you have a female client that is presenting with the below, it is always, in my opinion, as a clinician, best to at least have in the back of your head, is there some neurodivergence going on? So if you're finding that they have chronic and pervasive general or social anxiety that has just not resolved with a CBT program, or you find that it's just you're really stuck and you're not getting anywhere, maybe have a bit of a think, like, is this maybe a deeper thing that's going on? Is there something else going on for this person? Chronic and pervasive depression or self-esteem issues. Often a lot of self-esteem issues come from being neurodivergent in a neurotypical designed world and having had the feedback that they just need to try harder. that can have a lot of impact on someone's self-esteem. Lots of relationship difficulties or unstable relationships. Maybe they are frequently struggling with keeping and getting friends as an adult or as a teenager or as a child. Friendships might be a particularly hard thing, or it could be around romantic relationships. Maybe they're struggling to maintain boundaries or to be open in their communication, not people please, those kinds of things. So if you're finding that that is happening and that is ongoing, long-standing, nothing is working, maybe think about, is there something else behind that? Chronic burnout as well, like, are they always feeling exhausted, always tired, always low? Have they got chronic burnout going on? Is there something else going on behind the burnout? Also, ongoing difficulties with education and learning. That can be at any level as well. Maybe they got through school totally okay, but then they get to university and it's everything's really overwhelming. Or maybe it's at TAFE, or maybe it is during school. Maybe they get to high school and now suddenly it's much more difficult because they have to do all of these things themselves, whereas previously it was very routined. There is a lot of different things that will indicate that maybe something else is going on behind the scene, but these are some of the key things that I like to look out for in my practice. Now, I know we just talked about burnout a little bit, but I do want to talk about burnout and self-care, because self-care is really, really important in autistic individuals to preventing burnout. But it does look a little bit different than what you would consider self-care for a neurotypical person. So here on the left, I think it's the left, there is sort of a list of some universal self-care strategies. So obviously fostering a positive outlook, regular exercise, eating well, meditation, positive relationships, spending time in nature, journaling, adequate sleep, those kinds of things. Those are all sort of basic and will be helpful for those with autism, but also we want to include all of these things. So being able to understand their needs, strengths, challenges, and preferences is really important in being able to figure out what works for you. Understand your sensory profile. So understand what is too much, what is overwhelming, what works, what do you like, what don't you like about senses. Do you like a particular texture of something? Do you not like a particular texture of something? The light's too bright. Is going to the shops a total sensory nightmare? Like, understanding what your sensory profile is so you can understand you better. Set realistic expectations. So not society's expectations. What realistically works for you? Make sure it works for you. For me, full-time working doesn't work. I do a 9-day fortnight because I find full-time working really overwhelming. 9 to 5 doesn't work for me. I like to be here early and I like to go home early. We want to think about what about life works for you and what doesn't work for you. Maybe it's in the learning environment. Maybe you need to move. Maybe you don't need to move. Maybe you learn better by visual or audio. Think about, like, what is you? What works for you? And then set expectations around that. Be realistic. What can you do and what can't you do? Because it doesn't have to be what society says. Engage in your special interests. So make sure you're doing all of those things that make you feel happy, that give you energy. Find your community, whether that's your pride community or your autistic community or just your community in general. Maybe you find a community of D&D and that's an interest of you. Where is your community? Where is your connection? Is your family your community? Are your friends your community? Rest and sleep. This is essentially important. It is important to prioritize rest and sleep. And rest might look like scrolling on your phone. That's okay. If that's what you need, that's okay. You need to make sure you rest and you sleep. Seek support from others. Again, is there anyone in your community that can help you? Can your family help you? Can your friends help you? All of these things. Stimming. So using fidgets or stimming in any way, shape or form that it looks to you. And where you can and where it's safe, being able to unmask and be your genuine self and not worry about judgment from others. Do you have a place where you can safely do that? That may not be everywhere for you, and that's okay, but is there somewhere you can unmask? So self-care is especially important for autistic individuals because unfortunately autistic individuals experience higher rates of mental health when compared to the general population. And often necessary support isn't received because of communication challenges. This is so frustrating. Often I do not get someone presenting with difficulties with autism or challenges with autism. I get them presenting because of maybe depression or anxiety or XYZ, but we can work on that. But there may always be these underlying challenges because maybe this person doesn't know that they struggle with XYZ, or maybe they don't know about their challenges, or they don't know that they're potentially autistic or ADHD. So it's really about, if you've got someone in front of you, you've got to think about, okay, what can I do for this person, and what might be happening behind the scenes for them. And yeah, sometimes people in general just don't feel safe talking about it as well, which is really difficult. Burnout. Now, I talked about burnout just before, but I wanted to also talk about some of the warning signs from burnout, because this is often where we see a lot of the mental health struggles come from for autistic individuals. Often, a lot of this stuff comes up, but it looks a lot like depression. It is really hard to pull apart the difference between burnout and depression, and sometimes they might present with depression, but then later down the line you find out it is actually autistic burnout. So first of all, exhaustion, not relieved by sleep, maybe feeling tired, feeling exhausted. Withdrawal from others, like not engaging in any of their social circles, not being able to go to work, withdrawing. Increase in mutism, so struggling with speaking, struggling with communicating more than typical. Increased or decreased time spent on interests. Can go either way. Maybe you're spending a lot more time on your interests than you usually would, or you're spending way less time on your interests than you usually would. Struggling to meet basic needs. So that would be eating, drinking, showering, all of those really, really basic things that we need as human beings, being not able to meet those. Increasing sensitivity to sensory input. The lights might be brighter, the sounds might be louder, the clothing that you usually find to be comfortable suddenly makes you want to rip your skin off. Those sorts of things might also be an indicator that you're in burnout. Worsening executive function. So struggling with those task management sort of things more than you typically would. Being not able to prioritize effectively, or struggling more with time management, forgetting things more, all of those kinds of things. Decreased ability to mask. So feeling like your mask has come off, but you didn't want it to, if that makes sense. Like you are not feeling comfortable with showing who you are, but you also don't feel able to have a mask on. Increased irritability. That is pretty typical in depression, that one as well. Being more snappy with people, being easily irritated by people, easily annoyed, those kinds of things. Increased meltdowns or shutdowns. Shutdowns can look like just nothing. You get home from work and you can't do anything. You just need to go in bed and you just need to be in a dark room. Or a meltdown might be really, really intense emotions that come out for you. They just don't feel controllable. They feel overwhelming. Increased demand avoidance, like not being able to do a task. Not procrastination, but not being able to do a task. Wanting to do it, but just being unable to do it right now. Increased or actual thoughts of self-harm or suicidality as well can be an indicator of being in burnout. Increased anxiety and also health issues. So having headaches frequently, waking up feeling achy, feeling tired, feeling kind of like you have a cold. All of those can be indicators of burnout. I think it's also important to note here that you also should check everything else biologically with your GP. Check your iron levels and check your sleep, check your B12 levels, check bloods, check everything and make sure that there's nothing else going on. And maybe you are unwell underneath all of this, but we need to double check that we rule out everything as well, so it's not contributing to some of this burnout you might be experiencing. All right, thank you for listening. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. I've included here at the end some of the resources, places that I got this from. So I would highly recommend the Ladybugs. They do a lot of information on autism in young girls, and some information on non-gender conforming people as well. Autism Awareness Australia, and also the Neurodivergent Woman podcast. They have some really, really great resources across the board for all of these things. I would highly recommend you checking it out if you have an interest in this area. Thank you.